Hello and welcome back to the KC Glassworks YouTube channel, and today we are going to be doing part 2 of how to accurately create a leaded stained glass panel. So today we are going to be doing the leading portion of the process, and I'm going to teach you how I do it personally. There's many ways to do it, and I'm sure you'll develop your own way of doing it, but today I will show you exactly how I do it. So I think the first step is just talking a little bit about lead safety, and for me personally, I like to wear rubber gloves. You don't have to wear rubber gloves. Lead is only dangerous if it's ingested or inhaled, so that means if you eat it or breathe it in. So you really just want to be able to wash your hands thoroughly. They do make a soap that helps get all the lead off of your skin. But just like regular dish soap or hand soap is probably good. And then whenever we get to the soldering portion of the video, you want to make sure you have some sort of smoke absorber, like the Heiko smoke absorber, or some sort of like fume diffuser. And then, if you don't have that option, you can always wear a respirator. The respirator that I use is a 3M. And then like the actual filter is 601. So that's what I use for my respirator. You definitely don't want to have just like a normal dust mask to filter those fumes that are coming up into your face. So that's the most important thing, is just making sure that you're being safe whenever handling lead. Obviously do this in a safe area where there's no kids around or animals. I just work out in my basement, so make sure you're in a room that's kind of like away. So let's just go through a little bit of what I'm going to be using. Today I am using 1/4 inch flat H-came. So I'm using 1/4 inch flat H-came for this panel today. Lead comes in many different shapes and sizes. Typically I use H round 3/16 lead, and that looks like this. And it has a little bit of a round hump on the top. And then what you sort of want to pay attention to is what kind of lead you're going to be using for the size of your panel. So today I'm just working on something really small, but if you're going to be working on something much larger, you just want to take in consideration the weight of your panel, and then kind of decide what width of lead that you should be using for the strength. Okay, so with that being said, some tools that you're going to need some sort of lead nippers. So these are kind of old ones, but I have some new ones right here. This is a good pair of lead nippers. You can obviously, if you're just starting out, just get a cheap pair. These ones I think are almost about $50, but just a cheap pair is probably about like 20 bucks. And then also there are lots of different shapes of lead knives, and you can cut lead with these. They do need to be very sharp. I don't cut my lead with these. I sort of mark out, I'll show you whenever we get to that point, but I sort of mark out where I want to cut my lead with this tool. And then you're going to need a double-sided hammer, and then you're going to need horseshoe nails. You're going to need horseshoe nails. So I just have a whole box of those, and then you will also need some sort of like cushioning for your nail to go against your glass. So I just use pieces of lead. Some people use little pieces of wood, and then also you can buy these little blue plastic things on like different stained glass supply websites. So that is something that you are going to need. And then as far as like actually assembling your panel, you'll need like maybe just a piece of plywood that's big enough so that you can actually hammer into it. But yeah, so where I am starting out right now, I have my pattern, I have my glass pieces all cut out, all ground, and ready to assemble. So let's take a look at what we're going to do to start assembling. Okay, so here's the pattern that I'm working on today, and this is all of the pieces all cut and ground and pushed off to the side, and I have it mirroring my pattern and my pieces to the exact spots. So what I'm going to end up doing for this particular pattern, since it's very simple, I'm going to lay out my lead lines first and put them in their corresponding spot right next to all of the glass pieces. So then whenever we go to assemble, it's a much faster process, and you're just going to end up trimming up some ends. So I'll show you exactly what I did just to get to this point, and then obviously we'll get into the curves and whatnot. But I just wanted to just show you ahead of time that with something this simple, you can go ahead and lay out all of your lead lines first and set them side by side, and then assemble. Obviously this always isn't the case, especially if you have something a little bit more complicated. Then you need to start assembling from a particular point in your pattern. There may be an easier spot than a different spot, but in this scenario we are going to take the simple way and lay out our lead, cut it in a rough size. It won't be exact. We're going to make it a little bit longer and just lay it out against all of our glass pieces. Okay, so what I want to talk about right now is the heart of your lead. So whenever you're assembling your panel, to ensure that your panel isn't going to start growing, so this is a 9-inch wide panel, and it'll be a little bit wider with the lead on the end, but obviously this isn't going to be for a particular window. This is just for practice. But if you're in a scenario where you need to have exact measurements, you need to know that your panel isn't going to grow. So that's why in part one, I really talked about how to make sure that your glass is going to be the correct size so that whenever you start assembling, your panel doesn't start growing. So in this case, whenever we start assembling, what you want to look for is that the heart of your lead, hold on one second here, the heart of your lead will be in the center of this black line. So that's what you want. So I'll show you what we end up looking for whenever we start assembling, that you know that you're not growing. But what you want is that this heart is right in the center of that black line. Okay, so the next thing that I want to talk about is right now we are just rough cutting our pieces of lead. So this is just a rough cut of this, and this is obviously going to be way too long. So what we're going to end up doing is whenever we start putting our pieces of glass in here, you can see that it fits. You see that it fits nicely right on the inside of that lead. So whenever we start trimming our lead, this is what it's going to end up looking like. So you can see that whenever I squish my piece of glass right against that heart, that it goes on the inside probably about a 1/16 of an inch, maybe a little bit more. So that's what we're going to end up losing. So whenever you start butting these two side by side, you want to be able to butt them nice and close together like this. So we'll end up trimming off that excess that you see and leaving a little bit of a lip. That's something that does take a little bit of practice to eye up, but you can always just use a little piece of lead to set it right next to it and then mark it out so that you know, okay, I need to cut off this much. So let's say you're laying out a piece of lead and it's all the way at the end. What you would do is just butt this right up next to it and then mark out that little line right there and cut it. So then whenever you actually start assembling it, they butt up nice and flat. So that's just something to pay attention to, that this glass does sit in there a little bit, and then that you are going to end up trimming it so that all of your lead connects nicely. Okay, and another thing that you want to take into consideration is stretching your lead, which is very important. So what you want to get is some sort of clamp. So this is just one that I bought off of a stained glass supply store. There are a couple different types. This is, I think, just the most basic. And you just slide one end in and pull it a little bit so that it clamps in nice. And then I just take a pair of pliers and grip onto the end and give it a good stretch until, you know, you don't want to go crazy, but you want to give it enough so it's nice and straight and it takes all the slack out of the lead. It's really going to help strengthen your lead and make it last a lot longer. So that's definitely one thing that you're going to need whenever starting to use lead cane. Okay, so let's just continue laying out some of our lead lines. So this is just a rough size that I'm using for all of these little lines, and I'm just going to continue cutting those out until I'm finished with that. So what I do is just make sure that I'm using the flat side of my nippers, and you can see that there's a little bit of a cut right here, so I just cut, make it nice and flat, and then butt this right up next to it, mark it out with my lead knife, and then just take my lead nippers and cut that piece. And I just do that for all these little lines, so let's just get all those lines cut out. Okay, so now I'm just going to make all 4 of these slanted lines, and I just lay it right on top of the pattern, take my lead knife, and just mark it right out on those black lines for now. And I am going to make this little corner piece, and for that corner piece I just made like a little cross, and I'm just going to cut out, let me see if I can, it's a little hard to see, but you can see that I have to just snip off those corners like this. And I kept that heart intact and just made a little V cut. So you can see that that V cut is going to end up fitting right here like that. And then we'll just end up trimming it up so that it fits nice and neat there. Okay, so now let's get into some of these curves, and let's start with this right here. So here is number 26, and what I'm going to do with this is just take my piece of lead and start from one corner and just sort of shape around that piece and make sure that it's touching all the way. Okay, so you can see I made that curve around there. And then what I like to do is lay that right on top of that line and mark it out on those black lines. Just like that. Obviously this is going to be too long, but that's okay for right now. So whenever you have slanted cuts like this, I just match it up on either end and just squeeze like that. Same thing right here, just match it up on either end and squeeze. Okay, so do that for all 4 curves. Alright, and the next shape that I have are the petals, and what I like to do is, again, shape it on the piece itself. So whenever you have something that has an inside curve, I like to lay it right on top, and you want to bend backwards. So you just give it a little bend backwards and make sure that you're getting nice and close to that piece of glass, bending it all the way around, just like that. and make sure you're manipulating the lead to the exact curve of the glass. Laying that down on the pattern, right like that, and trimming up the excess. So for this, I'm going to go on the top flat and then to that circle. And I'm going to have this. So this is when I take a Sharpie and I start marking out how I've laid out the lead. So I went on this entire line right there and just cut off that excess with my nippers and lay it right next to this side of number 23. And let's do the other side of number 23. Again, bending backwards on that lead for the inside curve, making sure that it fits nice and snug, and bending that around. Alright, and then for this, I'm just going to go right there and right here, and we'll end up trimming that up so that it fits nice against those other pieces. For something like this, I'll go right here and I won't do that entire line right here. And again, just lay that right on top. And with this one, I'm going to trim right here, and I'm just going to do a flat line right there because we're going to end up trimming that up nice so that it meets up right against the side of 23. And we're going to do that for the rest of the petals. And last is the circle. So what I like to do for circles is start on the inside of the lead and start wrapping it around. And you can sort of lay it down and roll it. Okay, so then I just trim this little end because it's and I use my fid here and I try to manipulate that all the way on the inside, nice and flat. Okay, and I need to make this a little bit straighter, kind of like that, so that it will butt up against the other side of the circle. Let me just trim that. So I just try to make that nice and straight, like that. Okay, and then I open it up from this side and keep bending that over. And then you can sort of mark out with a Sharpie where the one end stops, so that you know where to stop this end. Alright, so I'm going to trim this right there. You just kind of keep trimming it up until they meet together, and this just needs Just needed to round it out a little bit. So, and there's our circle all together. Okay, so once you have all of your lead laid out, this is what it's going to end up looking like. All of the lead is side by side next to the piece of glass that's supposed to be at. So now I'm going to show you how to get started in assembly. Okay, so what I like to do, you can end up using some sort of 90-degree angle or square to start assembling, but I'm going to show you how I'm going to do it with just horseshoe nails. So what I like to do is take a couple horseshoe nails and put it right on that black line and just give it a little tap and make sure that it's not going on to the piece of glass that you're going to set there. And I'll show you a closer look. So this is how I end up starting whenever I'm assembling a panel. You can see that that horseshoe nail is right on that black line for number 9. And they're not tapped in really hard. They're just a nice starting point for this piece of glass. So I just set that right there. You can see that you can still see your black lines. And what I'll do from here is just take one of my pieces of lead and go right up against that with another nail. Give it a little tap and then remove this nail. Give that a tap and remove that nail. And put another stopper right there. Okay, so we have just a good starting point. So I'll just like adjust this around until I'm happy with it. And right there. Okay. And then you just want to double check that the heart of your lead is on those black lines. Alright, so now that we have our first piece right in the center of our design, I just go ahead and start with the piece right next to it. So this piece needs to be trimmed up so that whenever we start putting pieces of lead right next to it, it'll fit. So I just take those ends off so that our glass will fit nicely on the inside of all of that lead. Okay, so just trim those ends up a little bit, and it looks like it's going to need a little bit more. Again, this is just going to take a little bit of practice with eyeing that up with your sizes, and I just go right like that. And then again, I'll end up putting my nails right back on my black line right here to get started for the next piece, and make sure I'm not going into the pattern. Okay, so I just have those nails set up again and just putting the next piece right next to that. And I'm just going to put a stopper right here, and I'm going to put a stopper right here as well, so that those pieces don't slide back and forth. Give that a little tap. Give this a little tap. Okay. And then what I do next is the same thing we did on the first one, and just put some stoppers on the back end of this. And be careful that you don't crack your glass against those nails. They're just marker nails. Okay, and then I just remove those nails and put a couple stoppers right here, right like that. Alright, and then I just double check that I'm still on my black lines, that the heart of the lead is still sitting on the top of those black lines, and they are. And then I just take my next piece of lead and trim off those edges that are going to be overlapping onto our next line, and cut those and set that lead right there. Alright, and again, taking our nails and marking them out for the next piece. Setting our piece of glass in right up against those nails, and then putting some stoppers in. Okay, and I'll put a stopper here on the end. And then replacing these pieces with some stoppers, and I'll just put one there. So the next line that we're going to do is this line all the way across. Alright, so the next one that we're putting on is our line all the way across here. So just remove those nails. And put that in. And make sure you're all the way on the inside of your glass. Alright, and it looks like I just need to trim it up a little bit. So I just mark that out, take it off, trim it, and put it back. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And then just put a couple nails in. And make sure that your heart is still on top of those black lines, and we are good. Alright, so I think the one that I'm going to do next is this right here. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to put this lead line right here, and I'm going to put a couple nails on the back line just to mark it out. Okay, and we'll put one on the end right here. Alright, and then we will slide number 10 in. And just hammer a piece right there, and then put in some stoppers. Alright, and then we'll end up trimming this end all the way down here. So next we just take our little piece of lead, stick it right there, trim it up, okay, and then lay your nails out again. Number 11, slide that in, and then put a nail right there, and switch out the markers for some stops. Alright, and then do the same thing. Okay, and then, so you can see that we need to trim this little end right here, and I just mark it out like that. And just slide out the piece of glass and just cut it in place because it's just a straight line. So that's what I'm going to do for there.
Slide the piece of glass back in and just switch out your markers for some stops.
We can start right here. So what you can do is mark out this line right here. So just take a nail and put it on the black line. Take out these nails and slide that in just like that. And then hold that in like that. Take off that nail and slide this piece of lead in. So now that you can see where you need to trim. Trim that off, slide that piece in. And then you can put a nail right here and put a stop right here. Again, always making sure that the heart of your lead is right on top of that black line. So then next thing I do is just take these out, slide this piece in. And it might be a little bit hard to see, but you can see that we have those black lines showing. So that means that our panel is not growing at all, and that we're going to end up having a panel that's the correct size. Okay, so you can still see all those nice black lines. Alright, and then what I do next is put this curve right here, and you're going to trim up those edges a little bit. Just take your nippers, trim that up. And slide that piece in, and then put some stops on it to hold it in nice and snug. Okay, so then your next piece is going to be this curved piece, and what I like to do is set it right on top. So for this curved piece, I like to just set this right on top, right next to everything. And what I'll do first is trim this end right here. Okay, I have to trim that much off, so I just take my flat end, cut that, and then take these nails out, slide this piece of lead in, and then slide my piece of glass in. Okay, and then what I will do is mark out where I need to trim right there. Trim that off. And then set that right back in. And if you need to, you can put some stops on your black line. Okay, and then slide your piece of glass in. You'll lay out right here. So I just float it right on top, and I'm just going to mark out this bottom edge. So I need to do a flat line right here, and then I need to do a little trim like this. Okay, so you can see I have like a little cross. So what I do is just get rid of that flat line first. Then you can see I still have that corner to get rid of, and I just take my nippers and just take that edge off right like that, and do that on both ends. Okay, and then just slide that in, and do the same thing here and just trim up that end and place that piece of lead right there. Okay, alright, next piece is going to be this number 18. Slide that all the way in. I think I'm just going to put a stop on it. Okay, so what I do for this part is I just take my lead knife and mark out that curve, mark out this straight line right on top. And then what I do for this is I first cut off that end, and whenever I want to get a deep line like that, I start cutting out the inside of the heart. So I'll take either end, grab that middle, wiggle it out of there, so then my heart is completely gone, and then I just cut out that deep slant right like that. Okay, and set that right in there, right like that. Take this off of here and set my petal in there. Okay, and then it might need a little tap. Let's give it a little tap and set a stop there. Okay, so I think the next piece that I'm going to do is actually the center circle. And all I do is just line up that end with a solder joint. Hammer that in. Alright everybody, so I went ahead and finished all of the leading on this piece, and I put a border on that's just lead. Obviously you can use lead or zinc. Since this is so small, I'm just using some lead. So your next step would be putting flux on all of the joints and soldering all of those joints. And then after that, since this is also small enough, I would just wash this off in my sink with flux remover or dish detergent, and make sure it gets all the flux off so it doesn't corrode on your glass or on your lead, and then let it dry. And then obviously I'm going to show you how to cement this, but that is going to be for another video. Alright, so I think that's going to be it for this video today. I hope that was helpful for you in learning how to lead. If you have questions, put them in the comments down below. If I missed something that maybe you don't know what to do, also put that down below and I would be happy to answer all of your questions. So that's it for this one, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and also follow me on Instagram if you want to see what I'm working on currently. That's K_C_glassworks. And yeah, I think that's it. So I'll see you later.